Trinity Moses, paralegal.
It is nice to meet you as well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Welcome to my channel, and the live chat is looking forward to hearing what you have to say tonight. So I just, as a way of background, you and I met recently on Twitter. And yeah, so tell us, tell everyone, myself, my audience, everyone who's listening and watching, because this is also a podcast, by the way, a little bit about your background before we get into the topic of tonight's discussion, which is of course going to be about what's going on with Becky Hill and the Murdaugh trial, and what is going on and why is it happening. And that's kind of our topic. But before we get into that, let's just talk about you a little bit and what brought you to this case and what you do for a living and that type of thing.
Well, I am a paralegal. I started out as a legal assistant and I ended up loving the job. And so I went on to get my degree and I started working as a paralegal. I'm currently in college still as I work, and I'm working to achieve my bachelor's to advance my career. But I became passionate about legal work in a sense that I think everyone should. I think if you're going to do a job, you need to do it right and love what you do. And if you do, you're going to do a great job at it. I love to help people. I love to assist. And I feel like in the criminal justice field, people are so treated so ill. Like it's as if when you're presumed, it's innocent until presumed guilty. Right. And for most people, as soon as you are assumed to have a charge or what have you, you're automatically a convict. You're automatically given a stigma. And I know a lot of innocent people that simply can't afford legal services, and therefore they're having to take plea agreements. And I simply wanted to make a change. I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to help people that didn't have that benefit.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. I'm very interested in the Innocence Project and just calling attention to all cases. I have different reasons for, like, different motivations for how I started watching trials, and this isn't about me at all, but I will say one of the things that I noticed about myself is exactly what you're saying. I wanted, when I was watching a trial, to know that both sides were held to the standard, the legal standard that they're supposed to be held to, and there aren't any shenanigans going on. Because even if whether a person is innocent or guilty, it doesn't matter to me. Is if they didn't have a fair trial, it's not really a fair conviction, in my opinion. Yes. And we can't assume, I mean, unless there's a confession or unless somebody or a video of somebody doing something. I mean, that's so obvious, but we can't always assume. There can be some really weird things that have happened that have led to a person getting charged for something, and a lot of circumstantial evidence that might have made it appear like they had the motive and they were the ones that were at the scene of the crime, and all of those things that have to be proven. But then it turns out, guess what? It wasn't them. And sometimes it's DNA or something else that comes up later. And sometimes that isn't even a possibility. So
right.
So I'm just going to say before we start talking about the Murdaugh trial, Alex Murdaugh, of course, was found guilty for the murder of his son and his wife, Paul and Maggie Murdaugh. We're going to be talking about that. And Becky Hill, for those of you who don't know, she was the clerk of court. So she was clerking for Judge Newman, he's very lovable, isn't he? Judge Newman, who presided over that trial. Now, we'll get into the rest of it later, but I just wanted to interject that because, again, a lot of people come to my channel for certain things, and this is a new, it's not new because I did do some coverage of this trial with Katie Sunderman in the past, but it's been a while. So we're going to talk about that. So, okay. So as I said, please, I've said this in the chat already. It's already in the chat. Please keep an open mind. please don't shoot the messengers here. Sometimes I'm going to have guests on that might not be saying exactly what you believe or what you think is true. But my idea here for my channel is to help educate and to help us open up our minds and learn. And so that's what this video is for. And so let's get into it. I just, your intro is so admirable. And I love that you're working for the legal system for the right reasons. So now tell us how you're involved or associated or just interested in the Murdaugh situation.
It began on TikTok. I kind of started getting established on TikTok, and of course, being interested in the criminal justice field, I automatically noticed that case, and it really stood out to me. And it became an interest, not that I didn't feel at the time that I could make a difference, but I was so interested and intrigued that I began to deep analysis and continue to accumulate evidence and put things together, right down to seconds and inches and into the point where I began to notice that something's not right here. Somebody is not doing everything that they should be doing. If you do extensive work, this should have already been established. Some of the things that were not even stated at trial. But I began to get an interest in that, and I thought, from my first impression, I thought this man is guilty. Of course, he's guilty. Right. But that's the thing, is that people don't do their homework. They don't do their research. They don't do their evidence and analysis. And that's how people, they lose their jobs. They lose their homes, all because of these simple charges that have come up. All because the state, there's such a small percentage of what it takes to convict someone or charge someone, that it completely ruins their lives. So I became intrigued with that because I felt like something was off. And the more I began to study, the more that I began to see that this is an interesting case. And so that kind of intrigued me, and it got me going. And as I went on, people started sending me things and saying, oh, well, this isn't, right. Because they say you have an interest in that, and they want you to know more information. So you can accumulate more throughout your following.
Right.
So that's kind of how it started.
I love that. And I'm going to say not to that degree, but I felt, and I got a lot of criticism, not a lot, but I got some criticism for stating that I felt there were a couple things. I felt there was something really not right going on. I couldn't put my finger on it. And I'll just say two things that are fairly obvious, though, were the way that the evidence about Murdaugh's financial crimes did come in. I was pretty annoyed with that, and I was pretty annoyed about how long that made the trial go on and on and on. And I felt like because of that, he has pled guilty of those things. So I don't think there's a problem with me saying he's guilty of those things. But it made a lot of people really hate and disrespect him. And that was why I was watching the trial, because I was extremely interested in hearing about this attorney in the South, even though it wasn't somebody local in South Carolina, who was taking advantage of his clients to that degree, because I actually had an attorney do something like that to me years ago. It wasn't to the degree, but I was young and I had a small business, and it was a considerable amount of money at the time, and it was you place attorneys in a position of trust. They are supposed to be representing the courts. They're servants of the courts, and I do believe that the firm ended up having some disciplinary action, but besides that, but the fact is, with Murdaugh, that was what I was interested in. Then the murders came up, and I kept thinking, why would he murder? That doesn't make sense. Like, that to me doesn't make sense. So the first thing was the fact that the defense was able to put forward all of this obviously prejudicial information about Alex. And I don't feel sorry for him. I mean, it's like, hey man, he did those things, right? But I didn't think it was necessarily the right call, and it seemed like when the judge said that they opened the door, it felt like, no, it kind of felt like it was a setup. That's how it felt to me. I could be wrong. Don't shoot the messenger. That's just my feeling when I was watching. And then the second thing was this motive that the state put out. The motive didn't make any sense. And I do feel like they would have been better off not saying that his motive was to just, basically detract attention and have people feel sorry for him. Because that just, to me, seemed pretty outlandish. Now, is it possibly true? I don't know. But those were the two things that from a just from a potential juror off the street person, because I don't have a background in law or anything like that. I'm just interested in seeing what happens in courtrooms. Those are the two things that I thought were weird. But I do know we're going to talk about Becky Hill and some other things too. But I just wanted to let you know that was where I was coming from.
Yeah, just like myself, that's what should have captivated and really drawn attention to other people. But see, people just wanted to overlook that because they've seen, oh, this man is a liar. So he's automatically not given a fair chance.
Right. And a murderer of his child and his wife. Even, that's like 3 steps up. I mean, despicable what he did, the financial crimes, all of that. We know he's going to be in prison for life because of those things. But that doesn't mean he was a murderer. But even if he was, it still means he needed to have a fair trial. And so I was hoping that the state would, in that particular courtroom and judge and everybody involved, would make sure that he had a fair trial for this, despite all of that other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And I think a lot of times is that, with Murdaugh, I think that Becky Hill immediately seen money signs. And from my understanding in my research, she seen this way before the trial started. She was prepping. She was ready for this. And as much as I did not want to believe that this would happen, and his attorneys didn't either, it was too obvious. It was way too obvious that she really, and I said it from the get-go that from the very beginning when her son was arrested, I automatically said he has been wiretapping and potentially utilizing that as a gateway to help in the Murdaugh case. This man's over digital. He is he's a coordinator.
Right.
That is very,
Right. That's pretty crazy too. Yeah, we didn't mention that. So just for our audience, who, again, a lot of people in my audience might not be familiar with this case. So we're kind of, but so we have a case where Alex Murdaugh was an attorney. He was charged with just brutal financial crimes, including cheating his clients. Obviously has had his law license taken away from him, and he's in prison for those things anyway. I mean, he was planning to plead guilty to all of those charges. Then his wife and son are murdered, and he's of course the person of interest. He wasn't arrested right away. In the investigation was pretty sketchy. Also bothered me a lot. That investigation with SLED was far from perfect. I mean, we're never going to have a perfect one, but it was really all over the place.
Oh yeah.
And then after the trial, he was convicted. He was found guilty, convicted. Becky Hill, the Clerk of Courts, immediately came out and said, "I'm writing a book," and she starts, showing up even on YouTube channels and being interviewed about this book that she was going to write. And I thought right away too first of all, I thought, how could she do that? That doesn't seem like that would fit within the protocol of her job. Like, isn't anyone questioning it? I thought it was really weird and sketchy. I wasn't a fan of that. And then so she wrote this book, and eventually she started getting called out for one thing after another regarding the book. Then her son got arrested for wiretapping. Her son works for the county. He may have had access, we don't know yet, to certain files that would be of interest to this case and other cases that she might have been involved in. They were just not just the Murdaugh trial. And then just last week, she gets slapped with plagiarism charges, and her book deal gets finally pulled. And I'm pretty sure she'll have to take that money back. And she's not denying that she knew she was plagiarizing. She said, yeah, I took shortcuts. I did it. I'm ashamed. I'm sorry. So it's just a fiasco. And in the middle of all of that, the attorneys for Alex, after his conviction, came out and said that some jurors have said that Becky Hill actually influenced them or tried to influence them. Obviously, they're saying she did influence them, and they were pressured for a guilty verdict. The guilty verdict came in super fast, and I mean that can happen. But so that's kind of the summary, just so if anyone's listening and doesn't know where we're coming from or anything about what we're talking about. So we're going to talk about Becky Hill, right? You have some information about Becky Hill that you wanted to share. And then this evidentiary hearing that's coming up in 1 month on January 29th. It's supposed to be about a 3-day hearing. This evidentiary hearing will be held to find out if there is basis for retrial. So the defense will present their evidence in support of having a new trial for Alex Murdaugh, which is kind of hard to believe because it was the trial of the century last year. So it's probably going to be another one. So let's go. Let's see what you have for us.
Well, in the beginning, as far as, instances such as like there were exhibits that were missing from trial. Her making comments about traveling with these people. And she even had an email, all the emails that were just recently released, 2,000 something emails. And it's all from her work, and it's about her book promotion. Right? That alone is stating when you're utilizing your work email that you're using taxpayer time, money. You're not, you have to use your personal email. So that alone basically states that she was utilizing her position to promote her book, because otherwise she would be doing it at home in her own time. She wouldn't be doing that at work and utilizing her work and email. So, I mean, little sneaky instances like that are putting a hole in her credibility, which is what her whole motive was for Murdaugh. And so her intentions to hurt him and harm him and put this book out and make him look like this murderer and such a bad person, in the limelight, it's beginning to reflect on herself. And I think that was so cruel of someone to do that as a motive for money. At the end of the day, that's why a lot of people are so cruel and seek things like this, is because it's a motive for money. And that's really cruel. My heart goes out to his family, the time that he's.
Right. And let's say folks that it's your son who was being tried for murder, and you didn't think he didn't do the murder. He's saying he didn't do the murder. You believe him, and you find out that there are people that were involved. Now, she's the clerk of court, so she should be not involved in how any evidence, she shouldn't be involved in most of this stuff. Okay, that's not her job. But it does sound like she had a very inappropriately close relationship with the prosecution team, with those lawyers, including lunching during the trial, all kinds of things like that. And so how would you feel if this was your kid or even yourself and you were falsely accused, or you believe you're falsely accused? Again, I honestly don't at this point care whether he's guilty or not. I want to see a clean trial. And
Absolutely.
I don't know how, because I didn't feel good about that trial. I can tell you, I had a lot of questions, not to mention it was like 6 weeks. It was ridiculous. It was handled so strangely. By the way, she hasn't been fired yet. Initially, people said, oh, the initial things that we were hearing about her might have been, an indiscretion, not fireable offenses, this kind of thing. But the things have added up and added up. Why do you think she hasn't been fired?
Well, I know that someone that's in her position where she's elected into office, generally,
she's elected. I forgot about
yeah,
that.
yeah. There's protocol, and generally the governor has to be the one that will dismiss her.
Okay.
However, from what I could read on her emails, she's feeling as though that it's going to happen. She knows what she's done.
Yeah, now she will. She has to now. Yeah. Okay. I forgot. It's not always that they are elected. And again, it's more than just bad judgment that they have to be found to be involved with. Okay. So what do you think about what do you think about her past relationship? Did you uncover anything with her past relationship with Murdaugh? Because obviously he was a trial in that county for years, and she was the clerk of courts, not forever. She wasn't the clerk for a long time, but she didn't know the family. Any history there that you picked up on?
Well, for the first thing, well, the first thing is that, well, she's always worked with Randy Murdaugh and Alex. They've worked all these years. But she basically utilized her relationship and all these years that she's had with them to be more of an incentive. Like, I'm close to them and I know personal things. And even with Neil, she didn't want him speaking. She wanted to make sure that she was the one that was involved. And I think that she just got a really big, she become wanting attention, really, and money at the end of the day. But her relationship with the Murdaughs, I think she just seen money signs. She knew. And the thing is that she was so sweet and so kind to them at the trial, but really the whole time she was accumulating information and evidence on these people. Any incentive and insight that she could get.
That's weird.
And she applied that in her book.
Yes. Did you read her book?
I've read it briefly. I've not read a lot of it.
I kind of skimmed it.
And she really kind of, which Judge Newman is wonderful. He was a wonderful judge. However, his views to Murdaugh made everything so unfair. Like, at the end of the day, would you want someone presiding over your family member or someone that you care about or passionate about? Would you want someone presiding over their case that had that strong of a feeling about them? Automatically assuming, a judge is supposed to be a neutral party. They're not supposed to have, they're supposed to completely be level grounded, not, oh, you're guilty and this is my opinion of you. And it's disgusting. And, it makes it difficult. And that's why now in the evidentiary hearing, Judge Newman will need to be present. He will have to be a witness. And then, of course, the jury members and the clerk. So that should be interesting.
My question about Judge Newman is, how did this happen under his watch? How did he not, did Becky pull the wool over his eyes or not? I felt like he was a good judge. I do feel like his personal feelings came out in the conviction, in the sentencing, excuse me. But I feel like I tend to believe, let's say, that almost any judge would have had similar feelings if they believed the guilty verdict, which of course he's bound to because it's the jury's choice. But it's not his choice. But because everybody had experience with Alex in that court, like in anywhere around there, because he was a lawyer there for so many years. So I just wondered, so my biggest question about Judge Newman is more about how did this happen under his watch? And I don't know enough about how those things work. Maybe you, as a paralegal and somebody who's involved in the courts, could be a little bit more insight, offer some insight onto the relationship between the judge and his clerk.
I think that just from my interpretation of his body language, just the overall outcome of the court, I feel like that he really trusted. I feel like he trusted her, and that's why he put her. And she is in a high position of power and authority, and that's why she's supposed to be a neutral party, because she really could do damage, like she ultimately has. But I think at the end of the day, I think Judge Newman, I think he trusted her. I think that he believed her with the juror. And in my personal feelings, I feel like that the whole jury member that was dismissed, the egg lady, they call her, I feel like that the whole Facebook situation with her was completely fabricated.
It doesn't, it doesn't seem like it. Yeah, it happened.
Yep. And so I just feel like, just like that, and it makes sense. The jury, everything that that the individuals who testified and signed affidavits about her, it even was in her book, like her traveling to New York, and they were like, she specifically said that we had to have her, not to leave her side, not to speak without her permission.
Right.
And it all makes sense.
Yeah, she did a lot of strange things. I wonder what Judge Newman is feeling now about this whole thing. Of course, he did actually do one interview, which I was surprised. He said he doesn't normally, but I wonder if she convinced him to do that one interview. I can't remember who interviewed him after the trial, but it was kind of, usually judges don't do that. But it wasn't like he was out on a book tour like her. But for people who are watching this, even if you're not interested in this particular trial, the importance of these individuals who are operating in the courts, we don't often hear about the clerk of court. They're usually kind of this nondescript thing that happens, but there are a lot of things that go on during a legal process, a court proceeding, especially one that extends out for years and is as complicated as this, and goes to trial. And has other trials as well that are sort of attached to it. So it's important to understand that it's not just the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the judge and the jury. I mean, there are a lot of other things going on that can go wrong. Right. And it's important to me personally. That's why I like to have eyes on these trials, because if people are not watching and paying attention, the whole system could become really super questionable. And again, an innocent person could be in prison for life unjustly, or even unjustly because they didn't get a fair trial. So what do you okay, so I have so many questions, but again, I hope everyone who's watching this will keep like a fair, just try to balance everything that we're talking about and take a fresh look at this basically, and try to pretend, neutrality is not easy, and no human person can be completely neutral, but we want to be asking questions. I have another question, and maybe you can help us understand, why would Murdaugh not have wanted a change of venue? Not obviously they thought the case was famous enough across the United States, but at least he wouldn't have been in the courtroom with people who could have these kinds of connections to him.
I think that he had the impression, I'm not really sure why he would, but I think that his impression was that he had a closer relationship with these people, and a lot of them, they were closer. I think that he felt as though that they understood that he had a drug problem, and that's why he done what he done. But at the end of the day, people are human, and they're not going to understand things the way, we all do. They're not as understanding. And so I think these people had a lot of anger and aggression, and he assumed that it being these people that he's known his whole life, I think he felt like it would have helped his case, but it obviously didn't.
Right. That's interesting, because that one really blows me away, because had he been even out of state, I don't know what it takes to get a case out of state. I think you'd almost have to be out of state for South Carolina, because he had so many connections everywhere in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. But that would have, like, we would probably not be having this conversation right now.
I agree.
But what we wouldn't be, yeah, this wouldn't be happening.
The clerk would not have had the opportunity to tamper with things,
right?
And most
or the motivation,
yeah, right, exactly,
right.
So when you deal with small towns like that, you tend to get into little runs with money being a bad motive, politics, that kind of thing. But I think if he would have went away, that he wouldn't have had such corruption and involved in his case, because there was a lot of people that were motivated to bring him down.
That's what I think. And then he also wouldn't have relied on his personal relationships. So it would work both ways, because he sort of expected maybe the benefit of the doubt, or, for himself, because they knew him and they didn't know him to be a murderer, or someone that could do that, and knew him to be loyal to his family and all that. So again, I'm not saying I know whether he did this crime or not. All I'm saying is, as I watched this trial, I didn't expect to feel the way I did, but I felt very uneasy with a lot of stuff that I was seeing, and some of it I can't even put my finger on. But it's kind of like I just had a sense that it just couldn't be. And then my little conspiracy brain is like, okay, well, maybe the defense knew Becky was going to do that, and they were working with him in order to get a mistrial or something like that. Like maybe it backfired. I think anything's possible in a case like that. I think anything's possible with humans, right? Maybe because she did have a background with him, and so who knows? Just who will ever really know the truth? We'll never really ever know the truth. And it's between a person and God, or whoever was there. That's the only people that would know. So what else would you like to tell the audience about this plagiarism, Becky Hill, and what the Clerk of Courts does, how you relate to the Clerk of Courts in your job, and that kind of thing, or anything else?
Well, the Clerk of Court is basically, in my opinion, they are kind of like the glue. They hold all evidence, exhibits. They control these things. They have access to these things. They can manipulate things. They have a lot more power and more access to these things than basically anybody else between the two parties. Everything's filed through the Clerk of Court. Everything. Right. The exhibits that are going to be presented, if evidence is gone, they have access to it. That's another thing Melissa had mentioned in her group, the Murdaugh group, is that very day that they had jury deliberations, someone had mentioned and said, how do you think that the jury received it? And she said, oh, they received it well at Moselle, speaking of Moselle. And she just gave very details, such as Murdaugh the jury was 2 floors above him. He didn't realize it, but the evidence was in the room beside of him. And she posted that very day. So no one else would know those things but the Clerk of Court.
Right.
Not even his lawyers and the prosecution. They're not, who would know where evidence is at, where everything's placed, where the jury's going to be deliberating, every single detail.
Right. Now, did you say there was some evidence missing during the trial? I can't remember what that was about. Yes. Okay.
I'm not sure what the evidence is, because they didn't disclose it that I'm aware of. I couldn't find anything. But there were 2 exhibits that were missing during the trial. And from my understanding, Judge Newman was pretty upset about it. And somehow Becky retrieved the exhibit.
Oh.
Because they're not supposed to. She's in charge of releasing these things. And
sure.
Somehow she knew how it got out, but however this happened, whatever the evidence is, it took them a while, and who would have, whatever these exhibits are, they're obviously important because somebody's took them out.
Right.
To disclose what exactly it was that I could find, but there were 2 exhibits that went missing during the trial.
Wow. Okay, I kind of vaguely, but they did come back during the trial, so they were retrieved. That is, yeah, there were a lot of little things that were just so, I mean, with a 6-week trial, it's kind of hard. And I wasn't taking notes or keeping track. I'm more of I want to get a sense of things, not that I'm intuitive, but I'm just like trying to take the whole thing in. I'd have to rewatch everything and then look at details if I were to do it, which I don't think I'm willing to do. All right. So yeah,
I analyze a lot like that. That's what you're really supposed to do, because you see the things that you missed. So that's really a great thing to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And you're from the South too. Are you from the South? I pick up on a little accent. Kentucky. Oh, so are you following the Bardstown situation?
I haven't really got involved with it a lot because I've been kind of busy. And I've been involved with the Becky Hill thing and all this, getting prepared for the evidentiary hearing.
Right.
Yeah. But I haven't really got involved with it much.
What do you think we should expect at this evidentiary hearing? What do you want to tell us about what's coming up in January 29th?
Well, I try to research and find if there was any new exhibits, but I know what we're going to, some of the things we're going to expect is we're going to see some new things that are going to be presented that haven't been released in regards to Becky Hill's emails and jury tampering. I think there's going to be some clear, convincing evidence that's going to be presented. And so there's going to be emails. There'll be, I'm sure, audio presented. There's going to be text messages. Of course, the group is going to be presented, which is a big thing because she was administrator of the group, yet she stated she had nothing to do with it. That she had complete control. So, a lot of information was leaked during that time. So,
right. Yeah, that whole Facebook post with the egg lady thing. What do you think? Do you think normally a judge would ask for more? I mean, he was basically trusting his clerk and taking her word for it, right? I mean, it's not like he said, I want to see the face. I mean, he was just kind of ready. That whole day was so crazy. The fact that we're calling the egg lady.
Yeah, I know.
It's just, you cannot make this stuff up.
This poor lady. No. Everybody calls her the egg lady.
Right. It's just, she's like, I just have to get my eggs. And I was like, oh, that is so charming. But yeah, so in a case like that, would a judge normally just trust his clerk of courts to have done the proper research and vetting of this information and not ask for it, take a pause during because he had extra jurors on board? So is that, or do you think there's something more nefarious? Obviously, the defense thought she was favorable to them, right?
Yeah. For Judge Newman, I think that he trusted her and he thought she wasn't capable of going to that extent to manipulate a juror. Most people wouldn't think that. But when you're motivated by thousands and thousands of dollars, you'll do anything. Her son was coordinating over digital and media. So he had the capabilities of altering and getting into any account that he wanted to.
That's scary.
It really is.
So scary. Yeah.
And imagine how you would feel if something like that were done to you. You feel so powerless. And that's what I like to do, is to be a voice for people that I know in my heart are innocent, because I have evaluated every single inch.
Right.
And people seem like it's not realistic that it's something off TV, that someone could be set up, or, things could be altered. This happens every day. We're just not aware of it. And just in my state alone, Kentucky, 247 people have been exonerated that even had confessions because they were coerced and they were just tired of it. And they spent years in prison. You need solid evidence, and that's what we did not get here.
Yeah, it was that's really heartbreaking. That's super heartbreaking. Obviously we don't have a confession or a coerced confession at all from Alec. I still feel there's we're not going to get into the whole whether he was innocent in the first place or not, but I will just say my gut was like, okay, how once that timeline is pretty tight, but I always felt like, and this is just me, again, people be nice when you hear this, but it just seemed like somebody did this, and I feel like he knows what happened. Like if it wasn't him, this is what I've always said, and Katie and other people, I have a YouTube channel. This is what I said. If he didn't do it himself, he knows who did it, and there's a reason that he can't say who it was, because he's protecting maybe Buster or something else. I don't know what he has left to protect, but yes.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the thing is that is there a reasonable doubt? People are
exactly.
Like, oh, the timeline adds up, but is there a reasonable doubt that in 1 minute you can turn around and be gone, and somebody can follow right behind you and do something?
Sure.
Is there that possibility? Well, of course. Well, is there any evidence that this man directly has done anything other than circumstantial? No. So how are you convicting this man? DNA was under Maggie Murdaugh's nails. That alone should have been
right, and they didn't check that, right? And here's the thing: I'd love to talk to her managers. I think the reason I came up with that idea is because Alec was involved in buying drugs and gosh knows what else. So there were enough people. It's not like he was just like this country lawyer and he wasn't in any trouble otherwise. And we're saying, oh, somebody else did it to hurt him. No, he was involved with all kinds of nasty figures of people that he could have owed money to or something else. So that was my reasonable doubt. I just would have a hard time with the way this whole thing was presented. I didn't like it. I didn't like it's almost like the prosecutor had this foregone conclusion. He was very arrogant that this was going to happen no matter what. Where did he get that confidence? Because you really, as an attorney, shouldn't have, you should be confident, but you shouldn't be overly confident. I did not like the Academy Award style, the way the prosecutor and the state attorney and everyone walked out there. It just was very distasteful to me. Something didn't sit right. Yeah. Like I said, am I saying that means he wasn't guilty? I'm not going there. That's not where my brain was going. My brain was going, there's just too many things here that happened that I noticed that just did not seem right. So, yeah. Well, that's interesting. We're definitely going to want to watch that evidentiary hearing. And then any final things that you would like to bring out about Becky Hill's whole situation that we haven't covered? The fact that, and we haven't even mentioned this, but the fact that she would go out and write a book right after a trial, is really unseemly. It wasn't a year later, and no one was questioning people. It was so weird because people were asking her on and interviewing her, and I did see her partner on one interview at least, and he's like, oh, she's the nicest person in the world. And that's mostly what everybody was saying. Oh, she's so nice. So in other words, she couldn't lie, right? She couldn't have a bad motive. Well, nice people do some really stupid things, and obviously she has more than one slip of judgment. And for somebody to be involved as a clerk of court or in the court at all time, at that level, at any level that could be handling this kind of information, you cannot be known for having slips of judgment. And and it's not like she was the clerk of court for 50 years and this just happened. That was a fairly new post for her. So it does almost paint a really poor picture of her doing this for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. And just like her stating, you know, as far as her misappropriating funds in her position, she stated she never gave tours. That was in her deposition and or her response. But yet that very day, Melissa had posted prior to that they had her and the bailiff, Becky Hill and the bailiff, had been providing tours and continued to say that there was even 500 people that had already toured. So I mean, there was simple little intricate details, and it's like, oh, now you didn't. Now she did. It's just like she got caught, and now she's trying to backtrack. And you know, oh well, it was the bailiff who took the picture. Well, the bailiff will probably reap the downfall, you know, because he thinks she's a friend. That she's utilizing everybody, just like she was Melissa and Neil, as she comes down and gets, you know, she's just grasping onto people so that she's not being accountable. But at the end of the day, it's a little too late now, I think.
Right. And then also for our listeners, again, thank you for being here and keeping an open mind. Neil was it was the person who was previously a journalist, I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that Becky Hill approached him before the trial was over to co-author, right, this book, so that she had a little bit more credibility because, okay. And then Melissa, who is Melissa?
Melissa is his wife.
Okay.
She's the one who kind of, she was involved quite a bit. She established, you know, the group, and she encouraged, you know, she even emailed Becky at her work email and stated, you know, we'll make corrections. We'll go back and review and what corrections are you making? Like, she's kind of, you can tell she's not used to manipulating the system like Becky is, because she's obviously kind of telling things on accident. And when you say group, what kind of group are we talking about? The Murdaugh groups. A Facebook group? Yes, it was initially established Facebook to help promote the book, but in the end, it's given a lot of insight.
How interesting. Is that group still active on Facebook?
It is, but she has it invisible. But the people that were initially already in the group, they're still screenshotting and getting access to things. So
don't tell them. Don't tell Melissa.
No, we're not.
Well, that's fantastic. Okay. That's fantastic. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. Well, great. Any final thoughts? Anything you want our audience to take away in general about what you're doing? I'd love to have you back on. I'd love it to watch the evidentiary hearing with you if possible, but I'm sure you work during the day. I'm thinking about streaming it live. Yeah. So any final thoughts?
I would just want everyone to just have a really open mind. Is there a possibility? If there's a possibility, if you have an opinion, then you need to really evaluate, open your mind and say, is there could I be wrong? Evaluate all the evidence and not look at the fact that this man was addicted to drugs. And because of his drug abuse, I've seen this so many times. So many good people, because of drug abuse, have done unlawful things. But at the end of the day, we all have. And we just hope that God has the mercy on us, as, you know, that they should have on other people. But this man had a drug problem. That doesn't define who he is as a person. All of his actions were based on the fact that he had a drug problem. The money, the stealing, because I could tell when he spoke at the sentencing that he legitimately meant that. People made fun of him and said cruel and mean things. But I could tell that he truly said, my intention was not to do that. But because he had a drug problem and he ran out of money, and the money just so happens to be convenient, he's laundering money and he's doing things that him as a person would typically not do. And that's what people have to understand, is don't put yourself in the mind that he was manipulated as if it was an insanity. You need to look at him as if his mind, because it was altered. He's a different person. This has nothing to do with a murder. this is something he'd done because of drug problem with money. What motive would he have to kill his wife and his child? There was no insurance money. He loved us because he was crazy about his wife. They were crazy about each other. And if you read and analyze the evidence, you would see that in the little letters and messages and how they're constantly talking and interacting, that this man really loved her. And you can tell that it hurts that he can't prove that to other people.
Right. So it's an awful lot of money and an awful lot of drugs. And I think that's the other thing. It's like, was it just he was using all these drugs, or was he then dealing drugs? I mean, we don't know, but that's a lot of money and a lot of the amount of drugs that he was saying he was consuming seemed implausible too. But so when you have an open mind, or when you try to step back and look at this, I mean, for me, I would say I'm not going to get caught up in that detail. I just want to know, was the process fair? This is just my takeaway. Okay. This is separate from yours, and I respect yours too. And my takeaway is, was there a fair process? Would that process be acceptable if this was my son or my husband or whatever, who was put away for murder and given a trial that had so many things that were questionable happening?
Right.
And especially, I mean, to this point, it's to the point of ridiculousness. Do you feel like there will be a new trial granted?
I do.
I
do feel
too.
that. I feel it. And
I do too. Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to it. He's excited.
Mm-hmm.
He's happy. That's evident. I think this was truly God. I think this was really God. And I think hopefully this has taught some people. If it was one person, it makes a difference. There's a purpose for everything. Hopefully this is a lesson and to motivate people to see things outside the box and just how corrupt the system is.
Exactly.
Working. Yeah, I love the legal field. And most people think, oh, if you work in the legal field, you're just by the law. But I work in the legal field because I know just how corrupt it can be. And that's where my passion began, is about helping people. So just keep an open mind and know that it's out there everywhere, constantly. Corruption is very bad in the legal system. Good point. And that's what I was picking up on too. So yeah, I'm looking forward to too. I know a lot of people were like, oh, I can't handle another trial. I doubt it'll be 6 weeks. I doubt they will allow the financial stuff in there, the financial crimes in there. A lot of things weren't supposed to happen. I felt like happened. I could be wrong. It might be just a retrial again. Who knows? We're gonna in the end. It is we're not on the jury. So for me, I don't need to have more evidence or anything like that. I just want to look at trials from more of a global view and say, does that seem fair? Right. Does that seem like it was handled properly? Right. And I have so much respect just coming off from watching the trial of Charles Adelson for the murder of Dan Markel. So much respect for how the prosecutor has handled that entire, because there's multiple people. This is like the fourth conviction. So it's not always as fast or efficient as we would like to see justice happen. In his case, there's pretty much, he didn't deny anything. He came up with this crazy alternate theory, just if you aren't following it, but there wasn't a confession either. So, and there wasn't a coercion or anything like that. But I felt like that was a fair trial. I respected the prosecutor, how she handled it. And that's what you would want. You would want that for your neighbor, for your family, for yourself, if you were ever put in that position, in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's why it's interesting to me. And I really appreciate you coming on. And that's it, Sorry. I thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, of course. I'm so glad. I'm glad we got through the technical stuff, and I can't wait to hear what the audience says about this, and appreciate your time so much. And hopefully you'll come back and let us know Yeah, what you think about the evidentiary hearings, or if I live stream them. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle those yet, but it's such a big trial. So a smaller channel like me that's just growing a little, it depends on what my audience wants me to do. But if there's interest in this evidence, I think it's going to be probably one of the most fascinating hearings. It's not going to be a trial. It's going to be a hearing about what happened at that trial. I mean, what could be more interesting to crime buffs than that, or to trial watchers, right? So I think it's going to be fantastic. Well, thank you again, and we will see you soon. And just stay on board real quick here before I'm going to end the recording, and then we can say our goodbyes personally. Thank you, everyone, for watching.